Well, what might happen next, at least, Jeff? Yeah, that's right. You know, we talk about the undemocratic nature of proroguing Parliament for 5 weeks. Of course, one of the potential reasons that the Johnson administration did that was to give him the ability to limit Parliament, and that would then limit their ability to limit his room for manoeuvre. What he wanted was to keep open this option of a no-deal Brexit at the end of October. Of course, what we saw by proroguing Parliament is he accelerated the process for lawmakers to try and pass legislation that was signed into law on Monday that would, in theory, block that happening at the end of October. Now, here are the other options, of course. Theresa May's deal. Many months in the negotiations with Brussels. She came up with that almost a year ago now, put it to the parliamentary vote 3 times, and 3 times it was rejected. The last time of those 3, a relatively narrow margin, just a few dozen Conservative MPs voting with the opposition against it. One of the big challenges, of course, from the perspective of those Conservative lawmakers was the idea of this backstop in Ireland. They said it would become a trap where the UK would be unable to exit from those circumstances without European say-so. And one of the alternatives before that even came to pass during the negotiations between the UK and the EU was the idea of a backstop that only really applied to Northern Ireland. This would mean there would be divergence when it comes to regulations between the UK mainland and the rest of Northern Ireland, something that the DUP, the Democratic Unionists, were not at all happy with. And because Theresa May, Johnson's predecessor, relied on those DUP votes for her parliamentary majority, it was something she said that no Prime Minister would allow, and yet there is a possibility, if you listen to what ministers have been saying about the idea of some agri-food transportation of goods across the border in particular, that's something that you could see some movement. We've heard from quite a few Europeans as well, of course, that that's something they think is an off-the-shelf option that would make this a lot easier to get a deal over the line by the end of October. And of course, if there is no fresh deal that Parliament's willing to vote for, if Boris Johnson is indeed blocked and refuses to try and circumvent the law that's been put in place to try and prevent a no-deal Brexit, then he's going to be mandated to go back to the European Council and ask for an extension. That could go through to the end of January, but that is reliant, Steve, on the idea that the Europeans would grant that 3-month extension, of course.